Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining the third installment of our Thoughts and Conversation series. It's been a really interesting journey so far. It's the third session out of 9 that we've planned running until August 2023. And so far, feedback has been really positive, and all thanks to you. You've been part of it from the get-go, and here we are to talk about a very important topic, and it's about stress, really, especially as it applies to those of us who work shift patterns. Uh, we're joined today by Robert Holden. Robert is a best-selling author. He's done a lot of innovative work on health and well-being. It's been featured on the Oprah Winfrey Show, Good Morning America, top broadcast programs, and he has a lot to share today on stress. I think he's also had. I think he was the first official NHS Stress Busters Clinic founder, and he's written so many books around happiness, how we can make the most of our lives. As opposed to having life live us. So, Rob, welcome. Thank you so much for doing us the courtesy of being with us today.
Thank you,
And we look
Wesley.
forward to a really good session. My name is Wesley Ibo. I'm the communications lead for the Dorset Staff Wellbeing Program. And I'll pass the baton over to Rob. You have the
Wesley,
floor.
thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me to be part of your series. I loved the idea of a series, by the way, because hopefully it's my experience that when you participate in a series like this, there can be a build, and you can really the focus can be really that much stronger as you go. And also, I think often, when we're looking at subjects like stress or well-being and happiness, I think it's often about trying to build habits, really. We always talk about making changes, but I think in the end, I think it's about habits, and sometimes returning to old habits that worked really well for a while. But, then life got busy and it was difficult to sort of stick with it all. Anyway, so let's see what we can do in this hour together. The theme of the talk, the title of the talk is Shift Happens, with an F in it. And Shift Happens actually, firstly, was a book I wrote just at the turn of the millennium, actually. It's also been the subject of a PBS special in America. It's I hosted a radio show a weekly talk radio show for 10 years called Stress Busters, and I have a weekly newsletter that goes out every Tuesday, also called Shift Happens. So Shift Happens has sort of followed me around for a while, and it is about how we can make changes, particularly in times of change, and particularly when we're living in uncertain times and when we have been disturbed from our normal routine. I think most of us recognize that in the last couple of years, we have experienced the death of normal. And that can be very, very disconcerting. And most people's response to the death of normal initially is, I wish this wasn't happening. Even if the old normal wasn't that good, by the way, there's still that sense of, oh, blimey, I feel very disconcerted. And yet, within that death of normal, there is an invitation for a new normal, a better normal. And I think often during times of uncertainty and change, it's very, very difficult for us on all sorts of levels. And yet there is usually some sort of an invitation to make a change. And I think having forums like this, being involved in conversations where we can talk about some of those changes, I like to use the phrase possibility thinking. Possibility thinking, just beginning to encountering a challenge, a situation, and asking yourself, what is the potential invitation here, change here that we could look at that could make a difference? So with all of that in mind, I'd like to talk to you about 3 of my projects. Wesley's mentioned one of them already. And this is a project that was called Stress Busters. And then I'd like to talk about another project called the Happiness Project, which came after that. And then also one more project called Success Intelligence. Along the way, I'm very, very happy to receive your comments and any questions. So let's see if we can make this a conversation, if possible. And also there will be 15 minutes of Q&A and conversation at the end as well. And I really, really would welcome your participation in that, so that this isn't just a podcast, it's a live conversation, which I think is much more interesting. So Wesley mentioned Stress Busters. Stress Busters was a clinic that I set up on the NHS in 1989, in the olden days. My son Christopher asked me not so long ago, "Daddy, were you alive in the olden days?" And I said to him, "No, I wasn't." But then I realized I was. So in the olden days, I set up this clinic called Stress Busters, and it was a pilot scheme. We were treading new ground. I think at the time, stress was considered, well, it had a stigma. There was, I think, some shame attached to it. And most people wouldn't readily admit to stress. In fact, there was many papers, medical papers, that even questioned whether stress was real or not. I think we've had a big change of mind around that now, but at the time it was quite a pioneering project in a way. And I learned a lot from this project. I was based in Handsworth in Birmingham, and we were in a place where there was definitely economic difficulties. There was a lot of racial tension at the time. There was a big crime, rising crime. There was a drugs problem. There was a lot going on. It was really a very challenging situation for many people. And this clinic, the idea was that we were going to open this clinic up for free, and that people could be referred by their GP or self-referred. And that my job was to create a space where we could talk about the challenges of the day and see if we could somehow address those challenges in a healthy way. Now, rather interestingly, this was a public service, and it was aimed at members of the public. But actually, after a while, what I noticed was that actually Stress Busters was being attended mostly by health professionals. And it was health professionals who were taking some time off for lunch and would be attending the Stress Busters clinic. They were often there incognito. They hadn't told anybody they were coming, but in a room full of 20 people, upwards of up to 15 were health professionals. And so eventually, once we recognized this was happening, we also set up a sort of a self-care program within the health service to look after health professionals as well. I think the thing I'd like to say that I hope would be of interest and maybe even of value here is that along the way, my approach to stress changed. Initially, I saw stress as some sort of a dis-ease, some sort of an illness that needed to be fixed. But actually, over time, I began to relate to stress more like an invitation that is asking you to make a positive change. So in other words, whenever you're experiencing stress in your life, this is a little bit like a light appearing on the car dashboard and of your car. And essentially, this stress is a signal that is asking you to pay attention to your life and to make some sort of a positive change. So my working definition of stress was that if you're experiencing stress, stress is an invitation to make a change for the better. Now, by doing that, I think I shifted the conversation away from it being a bad thing and something that I'm doing wrong to actually, and even an illness, into being some sort of a positive change I could be making. People found that very, very workable. I still use that as my working definition today. When I'm experiencing that sense of stress, when I'm feeling tired, when I'm feeling anxious, I know there's an invitation here for me to make some sort of a positive change. And often it has something to do with self-care. Knowing myself as I do, my tendency is to give myself away too often when I'm out of balance. And it's to be looking after everybody else's well-being at the expense of my own. And so often when I'm stressed, there's usually a sense of, Robert, it's time to come back to yourself. It's time to pay attention to you, to put yourself in the picture of your own life, and see if you could do something, wise and kind for yourself today, just to get yourself, like, I want to say, re-centered, so that you're back in the picture, as I say, the picture of your life. So that's what I'd like to just to start with saying, if you're ever experiencing any sort of a stress symptom, pay attention to the symptom, of course, physically, and at the same time, address that symptom as an invitation to make a positive change. What is my high blood pressure telling me? What is the message that this migraine, for example, is wanting me to hear? Let's imagine that somehow the body is some sort of a message board that gives us signals, and that these aren't just physical ailments. They actually are signals, feedback, and invitation to make some sort of a difference. So if you wanted to turn this into an exercise, it would be to identify the stress signal. What is that stress signal that's happening for me at the moment? My scrunched up shoulders, my migraine, my high blood pressure. And what is that signal asking me to pay attention to? That's where I would begin. And that's Stress Busters. Now, if we move on to the second project, but actually I'll just pause there for a moment, just in case anybody's got a burning comment they want to make here, because if you do, you can do it, or we can save it for the end. But that's where I'd like to start. Are we okay? I'm just going to rely on Ali as well, just to give me any prompts.
I can't see anyone typing in the chat.
Thank you, Ali. Thank you.
Really good.
Thank you very much. Great. All right. So let's go to the next project, which was the Happiness Project. Now, I created the Happiness Project actually initially on the NHS in 1990. Well, about 1992, 1993, around then. And the work of the Happiness Project absolutely marked a shift in my work from being illness focused to being more well-being focused. The model that I was raised in, if you like, in my studies in psychology, was a model where the idea was that we were going to address the problems of your life first, and then once we'd dealt with the problems of your life, you would be free to go away and be happy. That was essentially the thinking. Now, what I noticed was that once you start looking at the problems of your life, you discover that some of the problems are presenting problems, and then after that you discover that there's an underlying problem under that. And if you keep focusing on problems, you discover more problems than you knew you had. And there is a saying, which is whatever you focus on expands. So in a way, the more we kept on looking at problems, actually, the longer it took to actually help people just go away and be happy. So I came up with this sort of radical idea, which was, what if in the middle of our life and in the middle of our challenges and with all of the uncertainty going on, what if right in the middle of all of this, we had a conversation about happiness? We're not going to save it up. We're not going to think about happiness when life is ideal and that we're better organized and we can find that missing sock, that always seems to go missing, and you know, we've generally got our life in order. We're not waiting until then. We're actually going to talk about happiness now. And that was the idea. And eventually what I did was I came up with a plan, and the plan was to see if we could create a program that could help people be happier. I was essentially addressing two trends at the time that some research was showing us. The first piece of research was that, and remember this was in the early 90s, economically things were better in Britain, things were going quite well, and yet most of the research was showing that people, more and more people were, well, let me put it this way, actually, the research was showing us that actually less and less people were very happy when asked, and more people were semi-happy. So there was a shift, there was a drop from people who were self-reporting and saying that they were semi-happy, sorry, very happy, to actually just being semi-happy. The other piece of research showed that actually, in spite of the golden age of economics, which had lasted for 20 or 30 years by then, actually more people were experiencing unchanged levels of happiness. This was called static happiness by researchers. So people were semi-happy and happiness levels were static. So one of the things I wanted to address was, well, why aren't we happier? What's actually going on? And I decided that maybe one of the causes of unhappiness is the pursuit of happiness. The pursuit of happiness, which is fueled by a 24/7 marketing campaign that makes you want to chase after more of everything than ever before. This creates a restlessness, a stress and an anxiety, which makes us try to maximize our life. We become what sociologists call maximizers. So we chase after more. We don't really define more, by the way, we just chase after more. And at a certain point in time, we just lose track of being happy now. All of the pursuit of happiness actually is all about happiness in the future rather than being happy now. So my goal was to create this 8-week happiness program and see if I could help people experience greater well-being in the middle of their life. Now, this caught the imagination of a documentary team who set up a documentary for the BBC. It was a QED science documentary, and it was called How Happy Are You? And or no, How to Be Happy rather. And basically put, we had two sets of independent scientists, one from Oxford and one from Madison, Wisconsin in the US, following volunteers on the 8-week program. And the volunteers were measured psychometrically, so a self-reporting test essentially, and then for what's called subjective well-being, but then also they were measured more from a hard science point of view, looking at brain function and looking at the effects of the program on the functioning, the hardwiring of their brain. So this was a very public event, and at the end of the program, it was decided that by the scientists that this was a genuine program, that the results were very, very positive. In fact, they were so positive that originally the QED, the editor of the documentary, or of the documentary unit called QED, who worked at the BBC, decided to delay the broadcast by 6 months because she was worried that with such a high positive rating for this program, it could create false hope in the community. This is something that psychologists often worry about, that we mustn't create false hope. We have to be realistic with the hope we offer. So anyway, the documentary was delayed by 6 months, and then just before it was put out, everybody was measured all over again, even though I hadn't seen them for 6 months. Some of them were still very much doing some of the habits that we were looking at on the 8-week program, And sure enough, all of the results, all of the scores were better, were still better than before, and were still high. So it was a very good project, I think, in many ways, and it created a fabulous conversation. And interestingly, one of the things that we really focused on was the difference between searching for happiness and following your joy. This phrase, following your joy, became really like a mantra at the Happiness Project. And I thought maybe what we could do, rather than me just talk about it, I might just ask you to do this exercise with me. And let's see if this exercise actually helps you recognize a difference. What we're exploring is, excuse me, is the difference between searching for happiness and following your joy. So, for a moment, what I'd like you to do is to imagine for 1 minute, and I'll time it, 1 minute, I'd like you to imagine that you're going to spend the rest of your life searching for happiness, and that you will be engaged in essentially a pursuit of happiness. Your 1 minute starts now, and I'd like you simply to imagine you're spending the rest of your life searching for happiness. Along the way, I'd like you to notice how you feel about this. I'd like you to notice sensations in your body as you think about searching for happiness for the rest of your life, pursuing happiness for the rest of your life. I'd like you to think about how fulfilling is this? How alive are you? Are you flourishing? Are you living your purpose? Are you growing? What's it like? How happy are you? All right, now we can pause there and just encourage you just to take a deep breath in this break, because we're now going to spend another minute. This time, I want you to imagine that for the next minute, you're going to spend the rest of your life following your joy. Yeah? Noticing what it's like to really engage in things that bring you joy right now. So your time's already begun. And just once again, notice what sensations do you notice in your body? How do you feel in your heart? What thoughts and images arise in your mind? Every day you are following your joy, a little bit or a lot, doing something you love in the here and now. Okay. So, this is the difference between searching for happiness and following your joy. Now, for most of us, searching for happiness, interestingly, when people tell me about this, most people tell me that the minute that they spend searching for happiness seems to take up a lot, seems to last longer than the minute for following your joy. But also there is a sense that really I prefer to follow my joy rather than to search for happiness. Now, following your joy is something that I would say I think it's really the key to well-being. There are different types of happiness. One type of happiness is pleasure. Pleasure is when we essentially experience a type of happiness due to a physical stimulus. The smell of jasmine, a beautiful landscape, music that we enjoy, the taste of our favorite food. This is pleasure. And pleasure is very personal, very temporary, and it does require a physical stimulus. Too much of a good thing is certainly also part of the equation. After that, there's another type of happiness, which is satisfaction. This is the type of happiness that most happiness researchers focus on, life satisfaction. I am happy because, there's a because in here, and I'm happy because I'm satisfied with how my life is. And this normally has to do with the circumstances of my life. And this type of happiness is very much based on, as I say, the circumstances of your life, the picture of your life looking a certain way. And but when the because isn't there, then the satisfaction drops. So the satisfaction is very much dependent on creating the right picture for your life. Now, interestingly, in happiness research, what we have discovered is that for long-term happiness, life circumstances have, and I quote, a short-term negligible effect on your overall happiness levels. Life circumstances help your happiness levels go up temporarily, but they often come back to a baseline that was there before the life circumstance improved. So before you got the new car, you're at a certain level, then you get the new car, your life satisfaction goes up for maybe 3 days, and then it comes back down to where it was before, to the base level. So life circumstances tend not to change the base level. What does tend to change the base level is joy. Now, joy isn't a thing. It's not an it. It's not something you pursue. I want to say that joy is an unreasonable happiness that exists in your heart and in your soul already. And I would say that joy is a little bit like a compass that is telling you that you're on track in your life. This joy is helping you make wise decisions, authentic choices, and to live a life that really is your life, rather than, as Wesley said at the beginning, rather than life living you, you are genuinely living your life. And a large part of my work is really about encouraging people to follow their joy, to identify the times in their life when they are at their happiest and when they are doing things that really work for them. Now, what is quite interesting about this is that when you're following your joy, it might not look the same as other people following their joy. So one of the things we do have to get the hang of is to be independent of the good opinion of other people. That's a phrase by Abraham Maslow. We have to be willing to follow the joy compass in us, not the joy compass in other people. And for that reason, often when we're following our joy, it might be that what we're up to is rather irrational, according to some, even eccentric, according to others. But it's very personal. It makes sense to us, and it feels meaningful and fulfilling to do it. So my work, whenever somebody's stressed, whenever they're experiencing great challenges in their life, one of the conversations I will introduce when I think the time is right is, tell me about joy. Tell me about when you are really following your joy. And if you are following your joy even more right now, what would you be doing more of, less of, or differently? If you were following your joy even more right now, what would you be doing more of, less of, or differently? One more thing I would just like to raise is that when we had our last recession, there was a lot of research that was being done on happiness. And now this is rather odd, but in a lot of the research, what we found was that for a lot of people, happiness levels increase during times of a recession. Now, it doesn't start off that way. Initially, what actually increases is anxiety levels and stress. But along the way, we find that often happiness levels do increase. Why are they increasing? Because in a recession, often we are forced to simplify our life. We are asked to strip everything back, and we are asked to really, as I say, make everything more simple than ever before. We live in what I call a multiple choice society. We think that what brings us happiness is having masses of choices. It's not true. Actually, happiness is often about just making simple choices. Even when we raise children, quite interestingly, you may have discovered this for yourself if you have children, is that you can put 50 books on a bookshelf for a child, say between 5 and 10, and say to them, here you are, here's 50 books for you to read. And in behavioral psychology, what we often find is that the children go nowhere near that bookshelf. If you put 5 books on that bookshelf and you offer the 5 books to the children, they will often go and spend time at that bookshelf looking at those 5 books, and they'll pick one. Children are often overwhelmed by about the amount of choices they are given in their life. We think we're doing something lovely for them, often trying to give them choices we didn't have. And there is something very good here, of course, but at the same time, we are often, this is too much of a good thing. And our work is to try, and it happens in a way we're forced to do this in a recession, is to simplify our life, make better choices, and stop spending so much money, and to remember actually what money can't buy. I always think, like, the most important thing you can remember in life is, what is it that money can't buy? Because if you can remember what money can't buy, then you'll have a better relationship with money in the long run. But the things that money can't buy tend to be the things we all want. And actually, some of the things that money can't buy really are here already, if we were willing to pay attention. One more thing, if I may, just as I close on the happiness project. Your happiness makes a difference to other people in a very positive way. One of the biggest blocks to happiness is the fear that happiness is selfish. If I'm too happy, I'll be selfish. And this is a very, very common fear, especially for those of us who have a strong martyr ethic running in our family, somebody who has been a martyr in our family, and a strong sense of martyrdom that exists in the family. There is this sense that actually we should sacrifice our happiness for the happiness of others. I believe in a different approach, which is that actually your happiness is a boost for other people's happiness. Now, in research, most people are afraid that actually happiness is selfish, and yet when you ask in research, you ask people, who is the happiest person you know? They name that person, and then you ask, how selfish are they? And you discover that the answer for the most part is not at all. They're not selfish at all. In fact, from doing this research, we found there's a high level, there's a high correlation between happiness and high levels of altruism. The happier we are, the more we want to share our happiness with others. Our happiness is a good thing. Our happiness is a good thing for our family. It's a good thing for the people we love. It's a good thing for the people we care for. I just want to add that in here, because I've done a lot of work in the health profession over the years, and this is one of the issues that has to be addressed and overturned. It's an erroneous belief that happiness is selfish. Yeah, pursuit of pleasure can be selfish. Only thinking about yourself and your life circumstances can be selfish. But when you widen this out properly to include joy, and you think about following your joy genuinely, and you think of happiness in a much more wholesome way, you do realize that when you're happy, you want to share it with others, and your levels of altruism increase. All right, that's the happiness project. So with that in mind, we'll go to the third project. The third project was a consultancy that I created called Success Intelligence. Success Intelligence was created in around about 2000, and it was a bespoke consultancy offering leadership programs and coaching journeys and seminars. And essentially, the aim of Success Intelligence was to think more deeply about what it means to live a successful life and to create new definitions of success that are good for individuals and also good for the planet too. Now, the catalyst for creating Success Intelligence was my experience of a health episode that happened to me. Initially, what happened was that I had an ache in the base of my back, which I ignored. I kept on working, I kept on lecturing, I kept on working on my schedule. Then the ache turned into a sting, rather like a bee sting, and it was painful, and I was sort of in a light sweat through the day, and I still didn't stop. And I can't believe that I didn't stop, but you know, when you're in it, you don't always think straight. And eventually, at the end of a lecture one day, my body seized up and I couldn't walk, I couldn't bend over, I couldn't do anything, and I had to go to hospital, and I was diagnosed with a prolapsed disc, and now I had to stop. And it was a horrible experience having to stop. I didn't want to stop. I felt like I was letting lots of people down. But what essentially happened for the next 6 months was that I was experiencing what I call now an involuntary stop. I think there are two types of stopping in life. There's an involuntary stop and a voluntary stop. The involuntary stop often happens because of some sort of a health episode or some sort of a life situation, including a global pandemic. That's an involuntary stop. And then we have a voluntary stop. The voluntary stop is when you're making wise, insane choices that include things like lunch breaks, weekends off from work, sabbaticals, dates with your partner, you know, those sorts of stops that you put into your schedule all by yourself. Now, Success Intelligence is a project that I still run today. I did a lot of work with lots of different organizations, including one which was Dove and the Real Beauty campaign. I wonder if you've ever come across that, which was really looking at ways in which we can transform the beauty industry. The research was showing us that although there are more and more beauty products on the planet now than ever before, less and less of us are feeling beautiful. And that's partly because the messaging is that we are not enough as we are. Also, a lot of the campaigns, the beauty campaigns that are created, work with models who are graphically enhanced as well as cosmetically enhanced. So in other words, by the time Photoshop has got to work on them, they're not even a real face anymore. It's a computer generated face, which we compete with, which we compare ourselves to. Anyway, that's an example of one of the projects I worked with. Another one was the Body Shop, for example. So with Success Intelligence, there was a model that we worked with, which was a model of 4 intelligences. And I thought I'd just share briefly these 4 intelligences with you. 4 intelligences are PQ, physical intelligence, EQ, emotional intelligence, IQ, which is obviously the intellectual intelligence, but it's more than that really, intellectual quotient. And then SQ, which is spiritual intelligence. So this model underpinned everything that I've done with Success Intelligence. PQ really starts, it's called PQ, it's physical intelligence. It's about attending to the wisdom of your body. A philosopher called Marion Woodman, she was a Jungian philosopher, said, when we take ourselves seriously, We accept the responsibility of knowing and loving our body. She said, give your body an hour a day. If it's not worth an hour a day, she says, there's nothing your body can tell you and not much anyone else can do for you. So she's laying down a challenge here, and the challenge is, with physical intelligence, pay attention to your body. Your body is a message board, and it's intelligent, and it's helping you with your overall well-being, not just your physical well-being, but also your emotional, mental, and spiritual well-being. Physical intelligence is about paying attention also to your energy levels and really recognizing what is it that energizes me, but also what is it that drains me. And by being clear on this, I think we develop a much greater sense of self-care along the way. One more thing about physical intelligence, and this is very, very practical, and this is what I most want you to consider here, is that physical intelligence is about paying attention to your calendar, to your diary, to your schedule. It's about making sure that when you look at your schedule, you can see that there is time and space in there for you, and that's there for you and your overall well-being in particular. That when you look at your calendar, you see that there is time for rest, that there is time for joy, and that there is time for being with the people that you most love. A lot of us, the way we run our calendar is the calendar is full of everything else we must do for everybody else, and we hope along the way that spaces will appear so that we can take advantage of those spaces. But actually, my experience is you've got to put space into the calendar first and do your best to keep them there. You don't find the space along the way, you make the space. And that's a very big part of physical intelligence. It's about attending to your time and space. You could say that your calendar is a mirror. And when you look at that calendar, when you look into that mirror, the point is can you see yourself in your calendar? Are you there? Or are you missing? That's PQ, physical intelligence. So an exercise would be this: name one smart move with your schedule that you could make right now. It may mean you have to reorganize something. It may mean you have to cancel something. You have to be willing to disappoint people sometimes in order to make an authentic and healthy choice for you. EQ, emotional intelligence, doing what you love, following your joy, listening to the wisdom of your heart. Imagine that each morning your soul posts a little love note through the mailbox inside your heart. And when you listen to your heart, that love note's there. You can open it up, and then the idea is you read it. What is your soul asking you to do today? What is your heart asking you today? Right along with emotional intelligence also would be relationship intelligence. And relationship intelligence, I think, there's so much to say on this, but all I would say right now is that relationship intelligence starts with making sure that you're not trying to do your life by yourself. I think one of the biggest causes of stress is something that I call dysfunctional independence. And dysfunctional independence is where we're trying to do our life by ourselves. The craziness of dysfunctional independence is that we are so happy to help others, but we don't help ourselves, and we don't allow ourselves to be helped by others. And that imbalance often causes a great deal of trouble for us. So beware of dysfunctional independence, and make sure that you are in the conversations you most need to have with the people that you most need to have these conversations with. And please remember that just as it is your joy to ask to help others when they ask for help, it is also other people's joy to offer help to you too, I'm sure. IQ, The third intelligence, IQ, I'm going to focus here on one word with IQ, and that is inspiration. What inspires you? Do you know what truly inspires you in your life? Have you identified your chief point of inspiration, the thing that gives you light, the thing that feeds you with energy, that helps you to follow your joy, that inspiration that helps you to feel fed, that helps you to be resilient, and that helps you to feel truly sustained in your life? Think about what it is that really inspires you and get close to it. Make sure that you are staying close to what inspires you the most. The last one is spiritual intelligence. And spiritual intelligence is about having some sort of a daily spiritual practice that really helps you with your physical well-being, your emotional well-being, and your spiritual well-being. And here there are so many types of spiritual practices that can be so helpful. But it could be, for example, visiting a yoga mat. It could be taking a walk in nature. It could be visiting your local church. It could be saying your favorite prayer. It could be a meditation that you've learned. Normally, when we're talking about spiritual intelligence, I'm not trying to be religious here. I'm trying to really steer us towards being spiritual, which for some people will be the same thing. Spiritual and religious is the same thing for some people, but it's different for others. But I hope the point is that when you hear the word spiritual, you're thinking about what spiritual means for you, and that you are doing something that helps you connect to something greater than your own life. And in connecting to something greater than your own life, you're also being filled, supported, inspired, guided, and helped by something else. It's amazing, for instance, how much people do feel fulfilled by a walk in nature, for example. So that is spiritual intelligence, and that is part of the 4 intelligences that are the basis for my work with success intelligence. And I think that brings to a close really just an overview of these 3 projects: Stress Busters, the Happiness Project, and Success Intelligence. So maybe now I can please invite any comments and any questions you may have about what we've been exploring. Hi, Gabrielle. Oh, excuse me.
Oh, hi. That's all right.
Sorry.
I did it not. It's fine.
Sorry, Anna.
Not a problem at all. You mentioned a quote, and it said, independence of the goodwill of other people is what I wrote. I didn't get it all.
Yes, Abraham Maslow. Yes, he said that he did this great work on being self-actualized, becoming our full self. And he said that in order to become, our true self, our full self, we have to be willing to be independent of the good opinion of other people.
Oh, that's it. Lovely.
Yeah.
Thank you. Good
Yeah,
phrase.
yeah. It's a challenge, isn't it?
It is, isn't it?
Yeah, you immediately
Good one,
think about,
though.
well, that includes the good opinion of my mum and my dad, the good opinion of any authority figure in my life. All of that, is what we're being asked to at least make an independent choice around, rather than feel we have to do what they told us to do.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you. I can see a hand for Jeanette.
Hi, Robert.
Hi, Jeanette. Good day
Hi.
to you.
Thank you so much. It was really, really fabulous. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
I'm a positive psychology coach, and I absolutely love this stuff.
Yeah.
I too had an involuntary stop, but I didn't realise it was called that.
Yes.
So that's been really helpful. But what struck me today is the importance of language and terminology, and especially around the Searching for Happiness and Following Your Joy. And those were two completely different exercises for me, actually.
Yes. Yeah.
So the Searching for Joy felt really elusive and effortful. And
Yes.
the Following My Joy, I was 8 things without thinking about it. It was great.
Yeah.
So that's lovely.
Great.
Lovely shift. I love the 4 intelligences model. I hadn't seen that previously. Is that your work, Robert?
It is. It is my work. And actually, you know, I haven't written about it until in a book until now. I have a book called Higher Purpose coming out in November. And in there's a whole chapter on the 4 intelligences.
Fantastic.
So yeah, I'm sorry that there's nothing there right now.
That's okay.
But yeah, it will be available for sure. Yes.
Lovely, thank you. And can I just ask one more question?
Yes, please.
You gave a great example of the children with 50 books on the bookshelf.
Yeah.
5 and the and I was just wondering, and I think I might know the answer, but I'm just curious. The 5 books that they did engage with.
Yeah.
Does that alter as we get older? Does it alter as we age, that choice thing, or does it remain? I think it remains easier, right, if we've got less choice.
Absolutely right. Yes. You know, we've done research where often people will, you know, we've done it with DVDs over the years, CDs over the years, you know, and books. It's just this sense, that if I have more choice, I'll get around to enjoying it all more. But actually, strangely enough, we tend to veer away from it all.
Yeah.
And I think what it is partly, I think, Jeanette, is that it gets us into a wanting and getting mode instead of a genuine being mode.
Yes.
There was a wonderful psychologist called Erich Fromm. Did you ever come across Erich Fromm in your work? Erich Fromm was an Austrian psychologist who he lived in America, but in the 50s he said that we are in danger of becoming what he called homo consumens. And he said, we're going to change the whole world into a shopping mall where we try to buy happiness instead of actually genuinely experience happiness.
Yeah.
And he made the difference between what he called a having mode and a being mode. And he said that when we spend time with our being, we make very simple choices. We're more present. This was the key thing. We're more present.
Yeah.
And we're spending less time chasing, hoping, getting, wanting, having, searching. And I found that incredibly helpful, Janet. And also rather, it was like an alarm to think that he was saying that in the 50s and in the 60s. Yeah. But I think it's sort of come true. So yes, sort of simple choices, strangely enough, that we can give ourselves more to in the present moment, helps us to see that actually the joy is already there, really.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's what positive psychology does so well, generally, don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I completely
Yeah.
I think there are so many overlaps, but there's so much new stuff as well. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you, Jeanette. Yeah. And good to have mentioned, just the whole field of positive psychology, I think, because I think makes psychology far more interesting ultimately. That we can be talking about the whole human, rather than just our problems. Thank you,
Rob.
Yes,
Robert, if you will, there's a question from Faye.
Please.
She wanted you to give an example of an inspirational identification just before she leaves.
Yeah, thank you. Well, so what is it that inspires me? Well, it can sometimes be people. So it could be some sort of a person. And so, for example, for me, it would be people like Martin Luther King, Maya Angelou. I got to interview Maya Angelou 3 times in my life. I felt extraordinarily blessed by that. Why did they inspire me? I think it was because I just felt that I would like to be that sort of a person in my life. Somebody who is an activist, somebody who's championing a cause. So it could very much be that. Something else for me, I tend to do is I like to read a poem every day. I have written a book of poetry. I love poems because for me, they are not just an intellectual exercise. They help me to speak to my heart. So I love poets like Mary Oliver, for example. Mary Oliver writes these amazing poems that often come with a question. One of her questions is, what is it you plan to do with your one wild what do you plan to do with your one wild and delicious life? I want to say something like that. That's not exactly the quote, but it is something like that. And I find often great poetry inspires me to think in a new way, for example. So that helps me. My favorite prayer is the St. Francis of Assisi prayer, make me an instrument today. So that works very, very well. Sometimes, to be honest as well, you know, when I go for a morning run, I tend to do a run 2 or 3 times a week. My playlist inspires me. I just put a playlist on of songs that make a world of difference for me. And normally it's Stevie Wonder and Earth, Wind and Fire, for example. So that inspires me. Yeah, so I hope that gives you a few examples of things that I find truly inspiring. So thinkers, people, works of art, creative offerings, people doing cool things in the world. Here's another one. What is the conversation you most want to be involved in the world right now? There's so many conversations happening in the world right now. What's the conversation you want to be involved in? Even if it's just listening to it right now, and listening is involvement, by the way. Find out about that conversation you most want to be part of. What's the story that's interesting you in the world right now? You know, for many of us in the UK recently, it was watching women play football, and we were watching this amazing tournament unfold, which was so much more than just a sporting event. It was a triumph, I think, for women and men everywhere. So what is that story that's emerging in the world right now? Rewilding nature, women in leadership, equal opportunities, following your joy. What is it that is a really big story that you want to be part of as well? Find out about that, get engaged, get inspired, and give that a go as well. Where I'm talking to you from today is Findhorn in Scotland. And Findhorn is an eco-village created 60 years ago by a bunch of weird and wonderful thinkers who've gone on to work with the United Nations on all sorts of projects. And that's an example of a really inspiring project as well. So hopefully that gives you some idea. But a lot of this, I think, comes down to, with well-being, it comes down to really paying attention to our lives and listening to ourselves. And when we listen to ourselves, that's when I think we begin to engage with this natural wisdom that we come with, that often gets drowned out by the media. But nonetheless, that natural wisdom is here, and it's up to us to pay attention to it.
All right. Thank you very much, Rob. Jeanette, if that's an old hand, is that an old hand? Oh,
It is, my apologies. Sorry.
No worries at all. All right. Thank you so much, Rob. I think it's been a really inspiring, elevating, informative session that we've had with you today. And really appreciate your time. And I think I speak for everyone else when I say that we've learned a lot, and there's more than enough for us to take home, and more than enough changes for us to make to feel happier, you know, to live life more than letting life live us. Thank you so much, Rob. And just to inform everyone, we recorded the session, so we're going to share it. We're going to upload it on the website. Check the video page of our website, and you'll be able to rewatch this session. We're also going to share a feedback form with everyone to let us know what you loved about the session, what you think we should do differently, what other themes that you think we should talk about, and we'll also share the future thoughts and conversation sessions coming up. So thank you so much for being a part of today's session. And if you have any other questions, you can send them to me, wesley.ebo@nhs.net, and I can speak to Rob and see how he can get them answered. Thank you so much for your time, and enjoy the rest of the day.